All right, so we're back, and today we're diving into, well, this whole hostage situation.
Yeah,
It's been kind of gripping the world, hasn't it? Going all the way back to that attack on Israel.
back in October 23.
Yeah, 23.
Feels like a lifetime ago.
I know, right? But it's been so much in the news because of, well, Trump back as president.
And his dealings with, well, Hamas, right?
Exactly.
Regarding the hostages, it's a mess.
It is, and that's what we're going to try and untangle today. So we've got a ton of sources here, articles, analyses.
Even some of his Truth Social posts.
Oh, yeah. Got to see what he's saying directly, right? And what we're seeing is, well, it's this really complicated dance, ultimatums, then ceasefires.
And just all these shifting power dynamics. Hard to keep track.
It is.
It really is. One thing that I find particularly interesting is how Trump's rhetoric has escalated.
Oh, yeah.
Even before he took office. You go back to July 24, that Republican National Convention.
Right.
He was already issuing those warnings, talking about a very big price if the hostages weren't returned.
That's true. And then it seemed like by November, December of that year, he was on Truth Social, ramping it up even more.
Oh, with talk of all hell to pay.
Exactly. You almost have to wonder, was he really trying to, exert pressure before he even had the full power of the presidency behind him?
Yeah, I mean, does that make sense? Was it strategic, or was it more about, establishing a certain image?
Right. Projecting strength or something.
Maybe. And it's worth noting that Hamas, well, they're not your typical nation state.
Right.
Their motivations are so deep-rooted, ideology and resistance.
Yeah, that's true.
So maybe just going in guns blazing isn't, the most effective way to get them to negotiate.
That's a good point. Like, ultimatums sometimes they totally backfire, especially when you're dealing with a group that sees itself as, fighting for survival.
Yeah, like backed into a corner. So then, right before his inauguration, January 2025, this ceasefire happens between Israel and Hamas.
Okay.
The U.S., Qatar, Egypt, they all helped broker it.
So it's in a big international effort.
It was, and it was this phased agreement, right?
Okay, so what does that mean, phased?
So Hamas would release 33 hostages.
Okay.
Out of, over 100 still held at that point. And this was supposed to happen over 42 days.
Wow, so a long, drawn-out process.
It was, starting that very weekend. And in exchange, Israel would release a number of Palestinian prisoners.
Interesting. So this ceasefire, was it like a clean break in the fighting, or did it cover everything, or was it just this hostage situation?
Well, that's an important thing to understand. It was specifically designed to address the hostage situation.
Okay.
And kind of pave the way for more negotiations later. But it didn't actually resolve, the underlying issues
Of the whole conflict.
the Israeli-Palestinian conflict,
Yeah.
which, of course, is so much bigger
Right.
and complex.
Yeah, way more to it than just this one piece.
Right. So even with this agreement, right, you still have this potential for conflict simmering under the surface.
Always there in the background.
Yeah. It was a fragile truce, for sure.
Dependent on, well, both sides keeping to the rules.
Yeah, making actual progress. And, of course, we can't forget what Trump does.
What's that?
He goes on Truth Social, declares this, epic deal.
Oh, yeah, claiming credit.
Even though, the Biden administration had done a lot of the groundwork,
Laying the foundation.
he was already framing it as this personal victory.
Yeah, like it was all him. You have to wonder if that kind of public declaration, if it actually made things, I don't know, more delicate.
Oh, for sure. I mean, any setbacks would reflect poorly on him.
Right.
Personally.
Right.
So his very public statements, they probably put extra pressure on things.
Yeah, like neither side could really back down without looking weak.
Exactly.
And then, almost right on cue, things start to, well, unravel.
February.
Hamas postpones the hostage release, claiming Israel's violating the ceasefire terms.
They accused Israel of blocking aid to Gaza
Oh, wow.
and continuing, their military actions.
So basically saying, you're not holding up your end of the bargain.
Right. And we have to remember how Hamas views this whole time.
Yeah.
It's through this lens of, decades of resistance.
Right.
So any violation, even if it was unintentional, it could be seen as a betrayal.
Yeah. And they use it to justify their actions.
Exactly. So this is where Trump issues his second ultimatum, even more aggressive.
Oh, yeah.
Demanding all 76 remaining hostages.
Wow. All of them.
Yeah. Released by noon, Saturday, February 15th.
So a hard deadline.
Or else. And you know what he says.
All hell will break loose.
Yep. Again.
I feel like he says that a lot.
He does, right? You almost wonder, does repeating it, I don't know.
Lose its power.
Yeah. Maybe the shock value wears off and it starts to sound like, just a hollow threat. Especially if nothing really happens.
No action behind the words.
Right, exactly. And it wasn't just the repetition. He also added this layer of, speculation.
Like what?
Suggesting that Hamas might be purposely holding back the hostages who were in less healthy
Oh,
conditions
wow.
to avoid, like, bad press.
So almost like he's trying to paint them as the bad
Oh,
guys.
totally. Like they're inherently deceptive.
Yeah. Manipulating the situation.
And we see that a lot in these situations.
What do you mean?
Well, portraying the other side as untrustworthy, right? Manipulative. It makes it so much easier to justify, well, being aggressive.
Right, you need to get public support.
Exactly.
So how did Hamas respond to this second ultimatum?
Well, they were defiant. Their spokesperson, Sami Abu Zuri, he basically dismissed Trump's threats. Said something like, the language of threats has no value.
So they weren't intimidated.
Not at all.
It didn't faze them.
Nope. And then they doubled down on their demands.
What were they asking for at that point?
Same thing as before. Complete end to Israel's offensive, full withdrawal from Gaza.
Still sticking to their guns.
Yeah. And there were like these unofficial sources, posts on X.
Social media.
Yeah, saying that they had officially rejected that Saturday deadline.
So where did that leave Israel? Stuck in the middle.
Pretty much, yeah. Netanyahu and his security cabinet, they backed Trump's demand.
Okay.
And they warned Hamas, if you don't comply, that's it for the ceasefire.
Wow.
And the defense minister, he even ordered the military to be ready for any possible scenario in Gaza.
Sounds like everyone was getting ready for a fight.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. That Saturday deadline, February 15th.
It came and went.
Yeah, it did.
And after that, well, our sources don't really give a clear picture of what happened next.
So we're left wondering, did the ceasefire actually end?
Officially.
Yeah. Did fighting start again? It's not clear at all.
Not at all. It's interesting, though, isn't it?
What is?
How Trump's pre-inauguration threats, all that bluster,
Right.
it seemed to help get that initial ceasefire. And, some hostages were released.
Right.
But this second ultimatum, the one with the deadline,
Yeah.
it seems like it did the opposite.
Push them further away.
Maybe. Maybe Hamas saw it as weakness.
Like he was desperate.
Exactly. And so they just dug in deeper.
It really makes you think this whole strategy of threats and ultimatums
Yeah.
makes it not so effective in the long run.
Especially in this situation.
Yeah.
It's way too complex for that. So this whole phrase, right, all hell breaking loose, it's been used again and again.
But what does it really even mean?
Yeah, what are we actually talking about here? Well, that's what our sources are trying to figure out. They're exploring all these possibilities based on, what Trump's done in the past, his policies.
Right. So not just like empty threats. We're talking real actions he might take.
Exactly. So one likely scenario, I think, is he increases military aid to Israel.
Okay, so that could mean like what?
Well, it could be like giving them even more advanced weapons, sharing intelligence, maybe even logistical support, boots on the ground.
Yeah, that seems, given his history, right? His strong support for Israel,
It's highly probable.
it does seem to fit his style. But what about other things beyond the military?
Well, he could hit him economically.
Okay, how so?
Sanctions on individuals or, any groups supporting Hamas.
Right, and would he actually go as far as like cutting aid to countries that aren't on his side?
He might. He's used those tactics before, other disputes.
Right, right. And remember the whole Gaza real estate plan?
Oh, yeah, back in his first term.
He talked about like taking over Gaza, displacing the Palestinians, turning it all into, he said, beautiful communities.
Right, and that plan, it was a non-starter. The UN, NGOs, everyone condemned it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't put it past him to use it as some kind of, bargaining chip.
Like to show he's serious, willing to consider anything.
Right, drastic measures.
So we've got military aid, we've got economic pressure, we've got this Gaza real estate thing. What else are the sources looking at?
Well, there's always the possibility of, direct U.S. military action.
Really? That seemed, didn't he campaign on like avoiding foreign entanglements?
He did, and it would totally contradict, his whole America First thing.
Right.
But he hasn't ruled it out completely. And we've seen him, change his mind before, when it suits him.
Okay, so not impossible, but maybe not the most likely. What else?
There's this other possibility, a full-blown Israeli offensive.
Wow.
With Trump's full support, basically saying, forget the ceasefire, let's wipe out Hamas.
But that's huge. What about the hostages?
It's a risk, a big one, devastating consequences for everyone.
Including the hostages, yeah.
But if you look at Trump's past, his support for, decisive action.
It wouldn't be completely out of character.
Right. And then there's this option. And knowing Trump, it's probably the least likely.
What's that?
Negotiation. Compromise.
You mean actually giving Hamas something? To get the hostages back?
Yeah, like going beyond the original deal, releasing more prisoners maybe, more aid to Gaza.
He'd face a lot of criticism for that, here and internationally.
He would. But remember, Trump doesn't mind being bold, especially if he thinks it'll help him in the end.
So then you have this release of the hostages.
Right on the deadline, February 15th.
And then a few days later, 4 bodies, February 20th. What do we make of that?
It's hard to say. Could be Hamas showing they're not scared of his threats.
Yeah, yeah.
Or maybe it's a signal, a subtle one, that they're willing to talk.
So is Trump seeing defiance or an opening? His next move will tell us a lot.
Exactly. And the thing is, we still don't know if the ceasefire is officially over. Israel said they'd start fighting again if Hamas didn't meet their demands.
But so far, nothing's happened.
Not what we know of.
It's like we're in this weird holding pattern.
Waiting to see what comes next.
Yeah, it's tense. But, while we're waiting, I
Yeah.
think it's important to step back, look at the big picture.
The bigger context.
Right, this hostage crisis, it's not just about, these specific people. It's part of this huge conflict.
The Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Decades of history.
Grievances, land dispute, politics.
It's crucial to remember both sides have legitimate points. They both feel threatened, like their survival is at stake.
But surely there's some common ground, something they can agree on.
Absolutely. The biggest one, of course, is getting those hostages back safe. Everyone wants that.
Right. And nobody wants this to turn into an even bigger war.
Exactly. Containing the violence, making sure it doesn't spread.
Those are good starting points. The problem is, how do you get from those shared goals to actually doing something?
That's the hard part. You've got this deep mistrust between everyone.
Any compromise, it's seen as weakness.
Right. So any negotiation, it's going to be a balancing act. Diplomacy, prayer, and some give and take on all sides.
Yeah, you're right. It's a really tough situation. Yeah, it really is. Makes you think, doesn't it, how quickly things can fall apart.
Yeah, for sure. It's a reminder, though, we can't just sit back and, accept things as they are.
Right, we got to keep pushing for something better, a more peaceful world.
Absolutely. And that means understanding, not just what's happening, the events,
Yeah.
but like what's underneath it all, the history, the motivations.
Right. And that's what we've tried to do in this whole deep dive.
Give you the information so you can decide for yourself.
Exactly. We've looked at Trump, we've looked at Hamas, Israel.
The international community. It's amazing, isn't it, how this hostage crisis has become this, focal point for all these different tensions, agendas.
It's like it's all boiling over.
Yeah, like a pressure cooker, which is why I think it's so important to be careful. Avoid, those easy answers, the knee-jerk reactions.
So where do we go from here? What are the options?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, and there's no easy answer. But the sources they point to a few possibilities. Some we've talked about.
Like increasing military aid to Israel, right? Putting economic pressure on Hamas. Even that whole idea of direct U.S. military action.
Which seems unlikely, but you never know.
And then there's always the diplomacy route.
Trying to negotiate, maybe offering concessions.
Each option, though, it comes with risks.
Oh, absolutely. Escalating the conflict, well, that could mean more people dying, more suffering.
And giving in to Hamas, wouldn't that be seen as rewarding terrorism?
It could, and set a bad example. It's a tough call.
It is, and honestly, who knows what Trump's going to do, but whatever he decides, it's going to have a huge impact.
On the hostages, their families, the whole region, and not just in the short term. This could change the whole course of things, make peace harder, or maybe...
Open up new possibilities.
Yeah, it's impossible to say, for sure.
So as we wrap things up here, we want to leave you with this. We've given you the information, the different sides of the story.
Now it's up to you.
What do you think? What should happen next?
This is a conversation that we all need to be having. It's about peace, justice, making these kinds of tragedies less likely.
And that's on all of us. We have to stay informed, talk about it, demand change.
So keep following this story. Keep thinking about it. Don't let it fade away.
Your voice matters. Your actions matter.
Stay curious, stay engaged.
And keep searching for the truth.
Tuning into